To be human is to be religious. To be religious is to make connections, to lead a meaningful life among the many competing forces of the 21st century. Each of us needs support in making meaningful reconnections to the best of our global heritage, the best in others, and the best in ourselves. Come, let us worship. Let's rise and sing. So welcome to the Unitarian Church. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I am I'm going to do it now. My name is Nathan. I am your only minister for today, because tomorrow you have two ministers again. The Reverend, you can woot that. Reverend Chris Long, your minister of Congregational Life, starts officially tomorrow. So this, it's in the sermon, but I'm going to say it again because it's exciting. Today marks the end of 4 years of ministerial transition. So you've made it, we've made it as of tomorrow. Today we're still in it. But we're glad that you're here. If you're a visitor, we're especially glad that you're here. If you want to know more about joining the church, come talk to me or anyone on the staff or someone who looks smarter than me, which is most everyone here. If you're online, welcome. Please engage in the chat. Let us know you're watching. And we have some things just for you to know about. First of all, after this service, for those online, you can come on down. We're going to have Sunday school and adult class. We're calling it Art and Storytelling that our own Leslie Grover is leading. It's non-cumulative. You can show up anytime. We're going to do that throughout July and some of August as well. Then, here's what's coming up for you in your worship life the next few weeks. Next Sunday is the first appearance of Reverend Chris Long as your official minister of Congregational Life. Sunday after that, we have a guest minister who is a member of this church. The Reverend Jim Vanderweel will be preaching then. Following that, we will have the gospel service led by Marie Flowers, who is leading the hymns today. If people still want to be in it, can they do it? Yes. All you have to do is go to Marie and say that you want to be in the gospel choir. And then the following Sunday is in gathering. So there is a lot of exciting stuff happening here in your church. Glad you're here. So we have a reading today. It's from 40 Tales of the Afterlife by David Eagleman. When soldiers part ways, the breakup of the platoon triggers the same emotion as well, the death of a person. It's the final bloodless death of the war. The same mood haunts an actress on the drop of the final curtain after months of working together. Something greater than themselves has just died. After a store closes its doors on its final evening, or Congress wraps up its final session, the participants amble away, feeling that they were a part of something larger than themselves. Something, they intuit, had a life, even though they can't quite put a finger on it. In this way, death is not only for humans, but for everything that has ever existed. And it turns out that anything that enjoys life enjoys an afterlife. Platoons and plays and stores and congresses, they don't end. They just move on to a different dimension. Although it's difficult for us to imagine how these beings interact, they enjoy this delicious afterlife together. They exchange stories of their adventures. They laugh about the good times. And well, just like us humans, they lament how short this thing is, how brief it is. It may seem mysterious to you that these organizations can live on without people who compose them. But the underlying principle is simple. The afterlife is made of spirits. I mean, after all, you don't bring your kidneys, your liver, or your heart to the afterlife with you. Instead, you gain independence from the pieces that make you up. Now, a consequence of this cosmic scheme is going to surprise you. When you die, you are grieved by all the atoms of which you are composed. I mean, they hung together for years, whether in sheets of skin or communities of spleen, but with your death, they don't die. Instead, they part ways, moving off in their separate directions, mourning the loss of a special time they shared together, actually haunted by the feelings that they were once playing part in something larger than themselves, something that had its own life, something that they can hardly put a finger on. We have flowers. We have flowers on the chancel that those in person can see, but those online cannot. So we took a little sampling of those flowers here. And then we have flowers in the back. These are from Sarah Traylor's memorial service we did yesterday. She was a member of the church for about 8 years, joined right after we did her husband's memorial service, and so fell in love with the church, she joined and got involved in branches and Together Baton Rouge and all kinds of stuff. You can still watch that memorial service online if you want. And also, I'm going to place a stone. We don't have a worship associate today because we have one minister. So I'm going to place a stone while you are doing your stones for the death of the father of a church member. Troy Bryant, his father, Harry Leon Bryant, died. This is also grandfather of Jaden Samara and Troy Jr. So this ritual that we have is open for everybody, visitor and member alike. We invite those who wish to come forward either along the east or the west wall. For those of you online, type it right into the chat. Take a stone, let it represent whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind. Place it in the chalice bowl. Now invite those who wish to come forward as we place stones. And would you say with me, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
For
Okay, so today is a fairly simple service that I'm going to go out of my way to make needlessly complicated. You're welcome. I'm calling it How to Change the World with One Simple Card. First thing you need to know is that most of the people participating in this worship have already decided to do that. Some of you have not. Some of you are not ready. Some of you may never be ready. Some may wait a long time. Some have been waiting forever for me to say this. But the card that I'm talking about is the membership card. This will stay up until it falls down. It may sound a little self-aggrandizing to say that joining this church is an important thing you can do to save the world, but stick with me today. Churches are supposed to make grandiose statements. What we're going to do is to talk first about membership in this church, what it means logistically. Then a little later, we're going to talk about how it feels and what it means for the rest of the world. So before we get into what it means to be a member, for us to be able to do that, we have to first talk about Unitarianism and Universalism. You see, we expect every July, we call it a church shopping month. So we're expecting a lot of people, pandemic times, like we don't have the hundreds we used to have, but we have a bunch who watch online and a few who show up every Sunday. So we always expect July to be kind of the time that people sort of test out churches. You know, people who are resettling usually settle before the school year starts in August. So July, we kind of put all of our sort of UU 101 on-ramping services. And for those of you who are watching online, hey, I'm glad you're scouting out the church. And those who are watching later, I'm glad future you found this service good, I hope. So anyway, if you want to know what membership means, you have to know what Unitarianism and Universalism means. Unitarianism came out of this idea that reason and doubt made your faith stronger, not weaker. It was from the very beginning a covenantal faith. I'm going to skip the first 1,500 years of Unitarianism theologically, just so we can get out of here on time. But essentially, there was a fight between whether Jesus was human or God, and Unitarians fell closer to the human side rather than the God side. In the 1800s, a group of white, mostly puritanical folks, settled in New England, and that is where Congregational Churches got their start. I'm going to speed through this, so just stick with me. And those churches, so the Puritans got kicked out of England. I don't have this as a fact, but I like to pretend. Y'all know those really angry preachers who always stand on the corner and shout at everything. They're mad at Sesame Street and Mardi Gras and gay people and all this stuff. But so I picture the Puritans as them, and England just said, we're done with you, put them on a ship and made them leave. I don't have any proof, but let's just pretend that's the case. So they formed, when they got here, they were doing something really interesting, which is for most of the history of Christianity, where Catholicism was the only option, Roman Catholicism in the West, the priest would read the Bible in Latin and be the intermediary between you and the Bible. Well, when the Bible started getting printed in people's spoken languages, they could start reading it and experimenting with what it said in it. So when these Puritans landed in America, they had no priests. They had no tradition by which to practice this new faith they were working on. So these congregational churches, there was one church located in every town. So there was the first church of Boston or Cambridge or all of those places. But they were bound by covenant, how they agreed to treat each other, rather than by what they specifically believed. Because as they were reading the Bible, they were discovering things and their beliefs were changing. They also picked their own ministers. And what they did is they would pick someone from the church, women and non-men in here, not you for another 100 or 200 years, but they would pick one of the men and send them off to seminary. Harvard was started as a seminary, and it was started eventually to be Unitarian. But they would send someone off to go get trained and come back and preach. Each congregational church was bound by how they agreed to behave together more than what they believed. And over the generation, these Calvinistic kind of sinners in the hand of an angry God churches, many of them slowly adapted and morphed until their theology became much more trusting of the human spirit, more embracing of a God within and a God still being revealed rather than a God of the past. Not all Congregational churches did this evolution. There actually was a huge split. And in 1819, they followed the lead of William Ellery Channing when he said that these new evolving churches are going to be called Unitarian Christians churches. So that's 1800s. The Universalists came over with a little bit of a different angle. They were more rural than the Unitarians, but they essentially, and they started as Trinitarians. Eventually they kind of adapted and grew and changed, and they became a little more Unitarian in terms of Trinity versus unity. But they always believed that an infinite loving God could never create finite creatures and then punish them forever for being finite. That was a lot. Are you all good? Online people, I can't get confirmation, but I'm going to trust that it was the same. In the 1960s, these two religions voted to merge into Unitarian Universalism. Another thing you should know, in the 1950s, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, there was this movement called the Fellowship Movement, where the American Unitarian Association set up churches all over the country, teeny tiny little 10-person churches, and they intentionally located them in college towns and specifically white communities, which is a sermon for a different day. But if you were wondering, part of the reason why this church is so predominantly white, that's part of it. But these little fellowships included the Unitarian Church of the Unitarian Fellowship of Baton Rouge. It changed its name later. I share all of this with you to let you know that the place you're walking into is not no place, it is someplace, and this someplace has a history. This is a religion more focused on how you practice. Really, I just went through a lot of history. Y'all are good? All right, good. This is a religion more focused on how you practice your belief than that you hold a very specific belief. Being spiritual is an individual venture, but being religious is a venture that we do together. Catholicism, as a point of contrast, who's at the very top of Catholicism? God, Pope, cardinals, bishops, priests, the people. For Unitarian, Universalist, and for Baptists, and for a few other faiths, it's inverted. The congregation is at the top. The congregation picks its minister, they vote on its budget, they own its building, and if they don't like the minister, they vote him out. And they actually it adapts over time, but the congregation decides on the congregation's own theology. So you'll have a Unitarian Universalist church that used to be Anglican. This is in Boston, it's called King's Chapel, that still uses the Book of Common Prayer. But they edited out all of the Trinity. And then you're also going to have a Unitarian Universalist fellowship or society, like the one I grew up in, that will not use the word God or prayer. And you would not be able to determine the difference between that and a secular society. So all of these are under the same umbrella. But that is because the congregation is the ultimate decider, and because today I want to talk about membership, it means you are the mini popes of our faith. All of this is to say, as we're considering what it means to be a member of this church, the membership of this church is the group that determines the theology, the minister, the budget, and the culture. Those of you who have decided to join this church are the inheritors of the vision of this congregation's past and the curators and cultivators of this congregation's future. Your membership, and more importantly, how you engage as a member, is what fundamentally matters here. Let's go ahead and sing. Let's rise for this one. This is a good old, I guess, clunky Unitarian hymn.
Church
like a hymn that squeezes in the word wrought. I'm not dismissive. I really love the old New England Unitarian hymns. We don't sing them enough, and they're kind of fun for me. You know, there's one hymn that has the word hence and whither in it, in like 2 words apart from each other. It's beautiful. This next reading is from the Commission on Appraisals. This is so deep. Not like deep, but like deep dive inside baseball kind of stuff. Every few years, our General Assembly, the assembly of all the Unitarian Universalists all over the country, they appoint a commission to study a thing. And they've studied class and theology, and this one that I'm referencing is about 20 years old. It's called the Commission on Appraisals Study of Membership. And so I pulled it's like a 60, 70, 80-page book. You're welcome to Google it. It's all a PDF. You can read it. I love it. But so I picked out some of the more worshipful, interesting parts of it. A healthy congregation is an organic entity. It will experience growth and change, as will the individuals who constitute it. As Unitarian Universalists, we know as well as anybody that our church, our faith, is the product of human reason and imagination. We also know that our congregations are voluntary associations. They were created by free people exercising their free will and making the decision to come together to worship, fellowship, and service. This is the legacy of our ancestors in the Radical Reformation. Those brave people died for their belief that religion should be a matter of choice. And they're not, that's not hyperbole. There are Unitarians who are killed for this. We don't have an authoritative book, creed, or priestly class to give credence to our corporate body. All we have is ourselves and each other, and the many people who choose our particular path before us. One of the problems faced by the contemporary church in general is coming to terms with the realization that the symbolic universe of religious community is a creation of collective human insight and imagination, as opposed to something that emerged directly from the hand or mouth of God. Did y'all catch that? It's a human institution rather than a God institution. It may be easier for us to live with that realization than it is for some other religious faiths. Each organ of the body belongs to a whole that would not be whole without it. We find our wholeness in relationship and community with others, people both like and unlike ourselves. Individually, we are changed, transformed by our relationship with each other. At the same time, the community as a whole is changed by the presence and participation of each individual. And let me pause here and say, I'm thinking a lot about those of you who really put up with the Omicron worship wave, where we were outside and it was like 20 degrees and the wind kept blowing over the music stand. Some of you are here for that. I'm going to read that again just so I can get it back in my mind. Individually, we are changed, transformed by our relationship with others. At the same time, the community as a whole is changed by the presence and participations of each individual. Both individually and collectively, we are in a constant state of change, of transformation. Transformation is the fundamental purpose of and reason for a religion of seriousness and depth. A congregation, any true community, is in an almost constant state of redefinition, based upon the complexities of the relationships and interrelationships of which it is composed. At a given point in time, the most influential member of a given congregation may be an individual whose behavior positively or negatively focuses the energy and direction of the whole. Congregations, in other words, are always involved in a process of transformation. They are different communities virtually every Sunday, affected by the changing needs and aspirations of their changing constituencies, those who are, in the truest sense, their members. A congregation that takes itself seriously, that takes its work seriously, will have a clear understanding of what its central purposes are, of what it is calling its members to do. That is the basis of our claim that a study of membership is really a study about evangelism. It ends there. Let me also pause to say you use really kind of ruffle at evangelism often. Evangelism means sharing the good news. It does not mean proselytizing the good news. If you have good news about your experience in this faith, that telling another person is evangelizing, not to convince them to join, but to make sure that your experience is known and that you are also sharing enough so that you open the doors for other people who may need it. And that might be the smoothest transition I've ever done into the offering. So we are actually going to do the offering. We're sharing it right down the middle with Planned Parenthood. Sadly, we were very able to predict that this month Planned Parenthood would need our money a lot. So we'll ask you to give incredibly generously as this morning's offering is given and received. So I'm very nervous to do this service, but probably not for the reason you're thinking. I'm actually very comfortable talking about membership in this church. The thing is, though, this is a sermon that I've been sitting on for almost 2.5 years. So this is right after I was scheduled to come back I was on parental leave after my daughter was born. I preached a Sunday. First Sunday was like I turned 40, and I had this whole sermon about how freaked out I was that I turned 40. And the next Sunday I was scheduled to preach, I called it the sermon where I ask you to join the church or something like that. Because at the time we had well, I'll tell you that later. But I had that service, and it was the second weekend of the shutdown. And I understand that I did not objectively cause the shutdown. And I didn't want to preach that sermon to cause another shutdown. Like, I understand in my brain that this isn't real, but we don't always live in our brains. So anyway, I'm sharing this service with you 2.5 years later. So the first thing you need to know is how to actually join the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. Most Unitarian Universalist churches have a membership book, and these books date back hundreds of years. If you go to the one in Rochester, actually, when Susan B. Anthony, as complicated as she is, joined that church, they have it in the membership book. For some reason, this church, and I don't know, we have to talk to our historians about this, decided we didn't want books, we wanted cards. I don't know why, but the bylaws say you must fill out a card expressing your sympathy with the mission of the church. Then you must be welcomed by a majority of the board, and we've never really had a member not be welcomed by a majority of the board unless they really filled it out accidentally. So, but the reason we do that is because Universalists had this problem in the 1800s where other churches would all join their church one day and vote out the members and keep the building and the silver. So we have a little mechanism in place to kind of keep all of another church from joining us and then voting all of us out. But that's it. That's all you have to do to join the church. I mean, we have expectations that are on the wall. That, if those of you online, there's a banner on the wall that says, worship together, be in covenant, contribute generously, be open to transformation, make this a better world. Not the point of the sermon today. I'm just saying the baseline for membership is you fill out the card and are welcomed by the board. You should also know there is a contingency in the bylaws to make a member inactive. We get in a lot of trouble with this when people feel like they are not inactive members and they show up and they're not listed. So we have between 4,000 and 8,000 members, according to our bylaws, just most of them are inactive. This is pretty standard. UU churches all over the country have a bunch of people kind of come through the doors, and many of them, not many, but often a lot of them fade out over time. And some of them come back. And it's just not feasible to have a church that averages about 100 in attendance on a Sunday and about 400 active members to just keep a roster of 4,000. So the way in our bylaws you reactivate is you just show up, or you make a pledge, or you go to your branches group, or you do any of the things, and that's all you need to do to be an active member again. But I just want you to know that the only way we remove you from membership is if you tell us you want to be removed from membership. A lot of other UU churches don't do that. They require you to pledge, and every year if you don't pledge, they just remove you from the membership. This church has debated that a number of times and voted it down every time. I'm not saying that is good or bad. That's a decision this church has made. When the UUA's Commission on Appraisals studied membership, they looked at surveys where I think it's Pew Research or one of the research organizations, called people and asked them what religion they were. And they projected about now 800,000 people self-identify as Unitarian Universalist. We have about 150,000 members of UU churches all over the country. So we are drawing the borders wrong, but that is also a sermon for a different day. The decision to join the church is deeper than just numbers, though. And for those of you who are visitors, this is not for you. This is for visitors 2.5 years ago in my brain. You should take as long as you need, and I'll talk about why we talk about joining, but this is not for the visitors per se. This is also members to sort of refresh yourself on why you join the church. But the decision to join the church is deeper than just numbers. The decision to join the church is a decision to join a religious community, to commit yourself to making that community stronger. It's to just trust that your existence and your gifts are enough to build something transformative. When we recognize new members, something we have not done since the before times, we invite them to come forward and we give them a stone, but they don't put the stone in the chalice bowl. They put it in the box. Because the stone's ritual is open to everybody, member and visitor alike. But the stone's ritual only exists if the members of the church exist. There's another thing that many people who consider joining this church don't think about when they join, and that your membership in this church, and more specifically your decision to declare yourself a Unitarian Universalist, has a huge impact on the world. See, like I said, I was raised in a little teeny tiny UU, we called ourselves a society, in Lacombe, Louisiana. I was the only Unitarian Universalist in my whole school, and it is incredibly hard to have a religion that other kids have never heard of, where they're at least prone to make fun of you, if not, like they did to me, find printouts or tear pages out of books on cults and show you that your religion is a cult. It is a hard thing to do to be a Unitarian Universalist child, especially to have a bunch of people tell you you're going to hell and you don't even know what hell is. So the thing that helped me more than service, more than Sunday school, more than being in the building, which for me was a very important place, was the fact that I could go out into the world and see other people who I knew were Unitarian Universalists. So that meant I had to see them in the church, and then I had to see them out in the world, and I had to have my parents say, yeah, they go to church with you, because it validated my experience of being in this faith. So it is not just what you do for yourself personally. That's the spiritual. It's what you do in community. That's the religious. Also, about a quarter of this congregation is raised Unitarian Universalist. Now, most of them are children, but about a quarter are raised UUs. We have for a long time had this idea of this being a church as like a placeholder that you should be a part of until you find a real religion, which is a way that a lot of parents who convert into the faith can feel comfortable about basically choosing a religion for their children. But for someone who didn't ever get to choose, this is my religion, and it's the only one that I've had. So it's really important for members to understand the difference between someone who chooses to come in and someone who has raised it. The other thing I just want to mention, which I don't have any way to tie in together, is Often I see adult UUs go out of their way to undermine the faith because it's a safety mechanism. So it is scary to admit that this religion is powerful and meaningful and could be transformative for you in your life. It's much safer to have a worship service where you keep fumbling through all the parts and don't give people an opportunity to do the deep work that they need to do, or to constantly tell people that you can believe whatever you want, or it really doesn't matter that you're here, or any, these, or undermine the leadership or the ministers or the staff. All of those are ways that are sort of self-preservation but hurt the experience of other church members. The other thing that's important about membership, I want to show of hands. Online people, please forgive me for this one. Y'all can type it in if you want. How many of you, the first time you came to this church, saw a bunch of other people you knew in your life, either social life or political life or world, and you came in here and you go, I didn't know you were a Unitarian. I didn't know you were a Unitarian. Anyone? Raise your hand. That's because we're not good at telling people about our faith. This is not proselytizing. It's not an issue with you not trying to trick people or convert people into this. It's just about people not knowing that where you go and what's important to you is important to you. This church is a blessing. Growing up, I never had to worry about whether or not I was going to hell, not from within my faith community. I never had to unlearn a lot of the most abusive theological bludgeons that are used on children today. Your membership makes that possible for the next generation. When I was a youth, as a youth, my experience in our denominational youth programming gave me a sense of meaning and helped me through some of the toughest times that I've been through. The ancestors and founders of this church were a part of that. What we're doing here is serious business, and I am proud to serve a church where its members genuinely do take it seriously. 2 years ago, I went to a workshop by Mike Piazza. He's a United Church of Christ minister. He started the largest gay church at the time in the world in Dallas, Texas. It was called what was it called? I don't remember what it was called. But he did a whole workshop on membership. And he said he tells prospective members that it is time for them to join the church when they are ready to take off their bib and put on their apron. And I've parroted that for a while. When you are ready to become a part of making this faith for future generations, when you are ready to engage in this church from a creation standpoint and to understand its history and its ancestors and its tradition, then you are ready to become a minister. But there was something that I also realized about membership in this church that I should have realized earlier. Right before the shutdown, we had all of these visitors who were coming for years. I mean, actually like years. And in branches, they took roots. It's a class we used to teach. The meaning of being UU is what we do now. But they took the classes, they would show up to all of the things, but they didn't join the church. And I don't know why. Everyone has their own personal process for deciding when to join a religious community, and it's not the business of the leaders to tell you where you should be on that journey. But they still weren't joining, and I wanted to sort of articulate a why. When the shutdown happened, and I was trying to figure out how on earth to keep a church together when we couldn't keep anybody together, I went on a kind of almost foolish venture to try to call every church member. It took me 4 months, partially because I would have to dodge my 4-month-old and 2-year-old, and partially because people wanted to talk. And calling 420 whatever people is a lot of people to call, and I miss some of them. But the thing is, though, I didn't have permission to call those who didn't join the church. When you join a church, you engage in a covenant to let your minister minister to you. You engage in a covenant to let your fellow members care for you. You engage in a covenant to care for other people. It gives us permission to be a part of your lives. It allows us to dedicate your children, to do your weddings, to be at the hospital with you, and to do your memorial services and walk you through the dying process. Membership means a part of being something that is larger. When you decide to join this church, you are committing to let us care for you. Right where you're seated, let's sing this next hymn. This was Earl Ramsdell's, ordained in 1941, was a member of this church until he died in 2016. He wrote the words to this. I'll invite you to a moment of prayer and reflection. That great named and unnamed mystery that many call God. Be with us in this space. Be with us wherever we are. And hold all of those who are tired and worried and anxious. Hold all of those who are grieving or angry or been victims of injustice. Hold all of us who want a better world. All of us who work for it and feel disappointed again and again and again. Help us to be a people of strong hearts, of kind words, And please never let us lose our vision for the world as it should have been so many years ago. Help us to hold on as things feel like they're going back further and further. And help us to love every person. Amen.
Just a couple of months ago, some of our dearest congregants came to me to say they were feeling disconnected from the church. It wasn't a complaint. It was more like a confession. These are our past board members, our most generous donors. Just a few years ago, they could not have imagined their lives without our congregation. And yet here they were feeling like they just weren't sure about any of it anymore. And they aren't alone. In the intervening days and weeks and what felt like decades between early 2020 and mid-2022, a lot of us have become familiar with this sense of disconnection. Not just because of the pandemic, with its polarization and politicization and that pit in our stomach that we never had time to tend to, but also because of the rise of white supremacy and fascism as it replied to what many of us believed was progress in creating a truly multicultural, multiracial democracy. And then alongside that, the climate crisis has come in close, which in my area now means we have wildfires in December, and in yours might mean still trying to recover from the last storm when the next one comes. The combination of all of these collective forces constitute for us a moral injury, a trauma. And yet we are pushed to keep going. We push ourselves to keep going, get back to work, even while death and extinction surround us and threaten us daily. We are encouraged to return to normal as if the last 2.5 years were like a blip in a Marvel movie. We have survived. And also, we are not the same. Whatever notions we had of the world being finished, or at least on its way, have come undone. Whatever notions we had of we being the ones to finish it have come undone. In so many ways, our churches, our association, the institutions around us have come undone. There is so much work to do, so much ministry needed, and we are so small, so tired, and so in need of ministry ourselves.
So earlier this week, Reverend Chris Long made a surprise appearance at the church. I was showing him something in his office, and it was right after the gospel choir had finished up. And so he went in and introduced himself to a couple of the members. Both were musicians, which I guess is a little obvious, but it turns out both had flooded in 2016. And I didn't know this until this week, but both had lost their pianos, which is a part of their livelihood. And both had had pianos given to them by church members. I bring that up not to say that piano donation is a requirement of membership. It is not. I bring that up only because it's a small example of how this congregation takes care of each other. And we are about to embark on a new journey in this church. We have been in a state of ministerial transition since at least 2018, if not 2017, when you consider the now Minister Emeritus, Reverend Steve Crump, when he was thinking about retiring, was probably somewhere in 17. So think about how long of a time that is, especially considering the stupid pandemic just deleted most of, time and space for me. In that time, you have known 6 different ministers, and tomorrow, on Reverend Chris Long's first day, you will no longer be in transition. I know the state of things is difficult right now. I know that there is every reason to be stressed out everywhere. And I know that Louisiana deals with stress and injustice and weather events and this pandemic by ignoring it and just pretending it didn't happen. I know that a lot of us are under stress, and I know that you are probably worried about your marriages or your kids or your parents or your family or your friends or your sobriety or your mental health. But here is the fundamental reason to join and be a part of this church. You being here is what matters. You being present in people's lives is what matters. You doing the work to figure out how to serve other people's needs, not to force them to serve what you need, that is what matters. I've mentioned this before, but you should know that churches all over the country are mean right now. Not this church. I'm very lucky to be in this church. But churches are just mean to each other, to the staff, to the ministers, because it's untended stuff from the pandemic that we haven't had a chance to work through. And there's not one person who does this. It's not one member. If you simply remove that member, everything would be fine. It's something that has worked its way into the system. So it happens when a board member says, I don't think we should do that, no one likes that. Or a church member, when they hear a sermon or a class, and they come to the presenter and they say, all of that was stupid and terrible and you need to stop it. This stuff happens. We are in the middle of what some of the leaders in our denomination are calling a minister crisis. Ministers are leaving at such high numbers. This is not you. It's just to set the stage of where we are. Ministers are leaving at such a high number, and people are leaving churches at such high numbers that there is something going on, something being unsettled. I don't know what it is. But all of that is to say, how you engage with each other changes it. Not how the president does, not how the staff do, not how the one person who you think has more power in the system does. How you engage with each other matters. How you engage with the world matters for this faith and for the betterment of the city and the state. Every time you show up here and are kind to someone else, you set the tone for this congregation. Every time you trust your leaders and your clergy and your staff, you set the tone for this congregation. Every time you go out into the world and you are kind to waitstaff or the people who fix your car or are helping you buy groceries, you are strengthening your own soul and this church and this world. The health of this church is not measured by numbers. It is measured by your presence here. Lord knows this state needs a lot of help. It needs more help than anything that I can do by myself. But a church of good-hearted people who are committed to make a more loving, just, and accountable world, that is what can change things. And this church, Unitarian Universalism in particular, but a church this healthy in this location, with this disproportionate amount of power on the levers in this state, has an incredible power to change things. It already has. Look at the list is like immeasurable. From Together Baton Rouge to the fact that this is dumb, because every church should be doing this, but the fact that gay people can get married here. That's some 1990s progress we're making. But all of that matters. So in a week where we are seeing actual images of our actual finite nature and actual images of us looking back in time at galaxies that have existed since the beginning, we are more than just our atoms. We are more than just our bodies. We are more than just ourselves. We are more than just the people sitting in this room together. We are Unitarian Universalists. We are a group of people who gather together under the radical idea that love cannot be conquered by hate, that belief is not more important than how you act, that justice will win, and we have a holy obligation to help it get there. We gather together to tell the world that they are worthy of love and of kindness and of justice. Louisiana needs you, I need you, and you need each other. Amen. Let's sing. I invite you to rise. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Go in peace, go in love. Amen.